What's up, y'all? It's Ty. In this video, we're going to be looking at my GOAT, Wilt Chamberlain, talking about his three different versions of his offensive prowess specifically. Shout out to my man Thinking Basketball for this video. Wilt, I got so much respect for Wilt Chamberlain on the court. So special.
50 points per game, 55 rebounds in a game, the only center to lead the league in assists. Some of Wilt Chamberlain's statistical feats sound made up, like he's a basketball Paul Bunyan.
Honestly, I think that's what people use to exclude him from all of like the top player conversations. Oh, but this is impossible.
Who could only be defeated by 8 Hall of Famers and rule changes that limited his dominance.
Yep, exactly.
Some view his records as proof that he was unstoppable,
Yep.
while others think he had to have been playing plumbers and firemen.
Oh, well, you know, he was being guarded by plumbers and firemen.
But
Come on, JJ. Like, you can't be the head coach of an NBA team and say that. You were the plumber and fireman. What would you do against Wilt Chamberlain? The only difference between you and those plumbers and firemen is you took, basketball serious as a kid and became a great shooter.
are those views fair? Was he a
Redick bugs me.
completely unparalleled scorer who could just outpass everyone on demand? Or were there other reasons that he started shooting less and passing more as his career progressed? And was Wilt Chamberlain actually a better offensive player when his scoring went down?
I mean, it makes sense. If you make the guys around you better, you're going to have more success probably. Big Wilt, Big Dipper.
He's far and away the best player I played against. I mean, it's not even close.
No star player in NBA history changed their style more drastically during their prime than Wilt. This is easy to see in his scoring numbers. His first MVP season in 1960, he averaged 38 points a game, kicking off his volume scoring years, where he peaked at 45 and 50 in back-to-back seasons.
50 points a game, man.
He won his last MVP in 1968, averaging 24 points per game, and finally in 1972, he finished third in MVP, averaging just 15 points a night.
It's crazy.
The not-so-obvious question here is, which of these was Wilt's peak? And more notably, when did he peak as an offensive player with all these changes? Let's start with that record-setting scoring, which sounds like it should be one of the best, if not the best offensive season in NBA history. Wilt had a pretty straightforward offensive game. Get to the low block, take a dribble or two, and flip it up. And he's posting up near the rim to use his size.
It's on Bill Russell, by the way. Y'all's all-world defender.
And explode vertically with that powerful upper
and
body.
one. He got pushed from
Here's
them.
another left block post up where he's leaning for position, dislodges his defender a bit, and goes to the finger roll. This wasn't nearly as aggressive or as violent as Shaquille O'Neal a few decades later, because in the 1960s, big men weren't allowed to chisel and pound into
they weren't. They weren't. If you saw the way the game was officiated back then, it's crazy.
Defenders around the basket like this. Here's a play from Wilt's era where he looks for space to back into, feels a little resistance and spins, and it's an offensive foul for that teeny little chicken wing or elbow when he turns.
Like, come on, man. I get it. Like, players nowadays, offensively, are allowed to do so much. But what are you supposed to do as a big man if this is how they're officiating the game? I want you to answer that question.
While Shaq was a little heavier and more powerful in his lower body, he was also able to play a more bruising style in his
offensive
time.
Foul.
Here's Phil Jackson on the difference.
And one of the things that you were taught, just get in Wilt's path, he doesn't like offensive fouls. If you take the shoulder and you fake an offensive foul or take the charge, so to speak, he really stops becoming aggressive.
Well, I would too. He has to play 48 minutes a game and he doesn't want to foul out. I mean, it's obvious.
Wilt's upper body was exceptionally strong, so when he caught it deep, he could blast up toward the rim and use his size to finish over smaller defenders. The power and breadth of that frame was an issue for opponents. Bill Russell goes to lean on him a little.
I mean,
that
that's
gives
against
Wilt
Bill
space
Russell,
to step closer to the basket. So when Bill goes to front him, he seals him off for the dunk. In single coverage, if Wilt sealed off his man like this with space behind him, it was over.
Again, on
and of
Bill
course, he
Russell.
was a huge target on entry passes. He also had that twisting finger roll he could go to on these deep post catches, and this was another way he used his size edge around the hoop. Instead of driving through the defender's body, he went up and over him like this.
That's what he had to do. You had to basically avoid all contact back then. It was crazy.
Wilt didn't really shoot a traditional shot around the basket for most of his career, instead opting for flips and finger rolls in the paint. And he'd even lob in a hook shot every once in a blue moon, but he seemed to de-emphasize traditional shooting technique at an early age.
What
When
in
you're
the
a little kid, you see little kids play basketball, they're always just shooting the ball. But that was not as important to us as doing the other things. We never would go out and shoot until after we went through our little drills. And all of our drills always incorporate a lot of running.
I think this explains why he was never really accurate.
Like, look, why is he shooting his free throws from there? Do y'all realize how good Wilt would be in today's game? Like, he would develop at least some sort of a jump shot. This is crazy. Why is he taking his free throw from 18 feet?
From the free throw line, regardless of what technique he tried. His footwork was on the stiffer side, shuffling his feet before dribbling, then the spin is a little off balance, and again, he doesn't really shoot it, but flicks it off the backboard.
I mean, he can control the ball, so it's not
as
bad.
a limited ball handler with his head off and down, and he ends up behind the backboard here. And sometimes he'd just take a single idle bounce to kill his dribble, and even when he had more space to attack, he still gives up the dribble, despite Russell backing way off his body. Then he loses his balance, so it's blocked, and there's some more clunky footwork before a gorgeous fade off the glass.
Oh my gosh, that fade is so filthy.
Way over his left shoulder was the one modern shot in his arsenal, because Wilt was the original master of the fade. We have all the footage from a 73-point game in the 1963 season, and he hit at least 8 fallaways in that one contest. The great YouTube...
And you wonder, oh, well, Ty, why was he not super efficient? Look at these shots he's having to shoot.
Channel 70s fan tracked 110 shots from Chamberlain's available games between 1962 and 1968, and half of his attempts were fadeaways like this, making them at just over 40%. So this was a major part of his scoring game for a big chunk of his career. Because he was taking nearly 50 true shots a game, he passed relatively infrequently. Wilt averaged just 2 assists per contest in those first 3 seasons. We saw
look at the guys around
this
him,
in the first episode of Greatest Peaks, where 1962 Wilt took about 20 scoring attempts for every assist, making this just about the most scoring-centric season in NBA history.
Absolutely nuts.
There's been debate for decades about whether this was selfishness or poor teammates or something else. And the new Showtime documentary Goliath examines this in greater detail. And by the way, I'm actually in this documentary.
Yo, let's go.
3-part series produced by Religion of Sports that looks at his impact on and off the court, exploring his evolution as a player, his personal relationships, racial impact, and more. But for me,
I might have to go tune into
connects
that.
the events in his life with his approach to basketball, and it's incredibly surreal that I'm in this with Jerry West, Pat Riley, and Kevin Garnett. So I do hope you'll check it out. It's streaming right now on Paramount Plus with Showtime. Something else you'll see in that documentary is the 1957 championship versus North Carolina, and Wilt was the centerpiece of that game. On one end, UNC tried to pull his shot blocking out of the paint, and on the other, they formed a zone around him to deny him the ball, which meant his gravity freed up outside shooters, even when Wilt never touched the rock. This
look at the guys he's playing with.
Off-ball value in the NBA is a key component to his offense, because he was a monster on the glass and a big finisher around the hoop. They didn't really throw lobs back then, but he was a huge target to toss it up to around the rim, and a sizable chunk of his scoring looks like it came from cleaning up his teammates' misses. Wilt's length and power made him one of the best offensive rebounders I've seen on film, especially when he was younger and more agile.
Did they go over
often
the back
tipping it
there?
like this, and he was just way too big against small teams like the Knicks.
No way he decided to shoot that. Oh my gosh.
He would also redirect shots into the hoop, which wasn't considered offensive goaltending at the time. And I suppose this was the 60s version of a lob threat, which let his team search for a shot before he finished with a high percentage dunk. Wilt's activity and movement on these plays...
This is just unfair. Imagine if these rules existed for Wemby. I mean, you're kind of seeing it in FIBA defensively. Like, they can just do whatever they want, him and Rudy.
Could be challenging for defenses, either blocking him out or occasionally when he'd flash into the paint like this, creating a deep catch near the goal. Although, from the footage I've seen, he could park himself in one spot and remain stationary for the entire possession without improving his position. In 1962, he was
I'd park myself in one spot if I saw those teammates too.
probably just waiting down there for good scoring opportunities. Instead of flashing across the lane, he points for a ball reversal, and his teammate Guy Rogers ends up with a long jumper instead.
Come on.
But
oh, he hit it. I mean, my goodness.
In 1964, he often planted himself on the low block for a different reason, because the Warriors and Wilt started to change their style of play. Wilt's extreme style from the
look, passing does help, but you got to have the teammates to do
early
it.
1960s raises an elephant-sized question. Just how valuable can scoring be without much playmaking?
And on tough
For the
shots.
last 30 years, we've been able to see what happens when players are on the court versus off it, and the best offensive players almost always have a heavy dose of playmaking to balance out their own scoring. Some players who don't rack up assists still create value away from the ball with their threat of outside shooting. So Wilt's offensive rebounding might help his lack of playmaking, but there's no recent evidence that great rebounding is as valuable as great playmaking. Traditional thinking is that he scored so much more than everyone else that his scoring alone bridges that playmaking gap. But remember, his rate of scoring per possession is comparable to modern leaders, and the percentage of his team's points he scored while on the court isn't a singular outlier either. I think his second best scoring season is instructional here, averaging 45 points per game in 1963, nearly 8 points ahead of anyone else in history. Wilt scored 39% of his team's points that year. His efficiency relative to the league was nearly identical.
It is crazy when you compare him to like now, like with the adjusted to scoring thing. It's not that crazy. It's really not.
And yet the Warriors posted a dead average offense and a disappointing 31-49 record. Whether they struggled because Hall of Famer Paul Arizin retired or because they traded 5-time All-Star Tom Gola, this other mega scoring season couldn't drag a lackluster crew above offensive mediocrity. In 1964, Alex Hannum took over as coach and retooled the Warriors' offense, asking Wilt to pass out of the post more while his teammates swirled around him in constant motion. This turned Chamberlain into more of a passing hub down low, spraying it out or handing it off to cutters, and he still took plenty of shots. He just often looked to pass to someone before setting up his own offense. In the games I've seen...
it's just better basketball. You compare these clips to the clips before, it's way better basketball.
For 1964, Wilt often caught it and went right into a scoring move.
Everybody's just standing there.
And while these quick fadeaways might be okay shots, his team system is also playing a part here. Look at how stationary Wilt's teammates are on this post-up. Jump ahead to 1964, and they throw it into the post and run split cuts at the elbow, and when nothing's open, then Wilt looks to score.
But it's so much more activity.
These are the same split cuts that Golden State has popularized in today's game, and Hannum's Warriors ran similar actions where the passer could cut off a teammate or slice backdoor for a handoff from Wilt. Another offensive
That's a
staple
tough
was
finish,
throwing it
though.
into Wilt and cutting right at him for a handoff, and this was a concept the Lakers ran a lot with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar years later. So the 64 Warriors cultivated a sort of poorly spaced low-post version of what the Trailblazers would run in the...
If I'm Wilt Chamberlain and I make a good pass for a wide open free throw line jumper and they airball it, man, I'm taking a post fade next possession. This is outlandish.
late 70s around
This is
Bill Walton,
outlandish.
although his high post passing was far more dangerous than Wilt's in these situations. The other reason 1962 Chamberlain was so quick to shoot was probably that limited dribble game. He wasn't able to attack space or easily flow from a scoring move into a pass. His best passes came when he was explicitly looking to distribute, which means he
You
rarely
got to realize Wilt really never made these types of passes, and then all of a sudden they asked him to. It's going to be tough.
had scoring moves that collapsed the defense and then created a shot for a teammate. Many great playmakers will literally flow from a shot to a pass after the defense reacts, and the closest I've seen from early Wilt was this dribble for a fadeaway. He sees the double team and kicks it out nicely for an open jumper.
Dude, look
Here's
at the
another
jumper.
the double team
Look at the
and
jumper.
kicks it out nicely for an open jumper.
Come on, dog. Like, come on, man.
Here's
This
another
is-
one
this is
from
crazy
his
to
rookie
me.
season.
And y'all wanted him to beat Sam Jones, Bill Russell, all those.
Takes
come
that
on.
single dribble he loves, but aborts when he senses the
Havlicek, like-
double. Only the pass is an idle restart instead of punishing the defense on the other side of the paint. I've seen him miss a few wide open layup passes like this.
Yeah, he was open.
And in 64, he was still shooting plenty. So sometimes an open teammate lost out to a Wilt shot instead. Still, Wilt was able to set up more open shots for teammates by looking to pass out of the post like this in 1964, even if the spacing of the era gave him fewer easy targets and let opponents get away with double teams where they didn't have to leave anyone open.
Like, what is he supposed to do? There's 10 people basically in the paint right now.
The Celtics in particular tried to deny and double Wilt. Casey Jones crowds him. The best pass is probably across the court, but there's no spacing and it's an awkward off-balance shot instead. Here's another play from the 64 finals where Jones sags way off his man to deny Wilt the ball, conceding an open shot. And again,
That's
there's
what I'm saying. They don't care about Wilt's teammates. They
same
don't.
technique. Then when Wilt finally catches it down low, he's doubled and has a cutter in the lane, but instead tries it himself with the kiss off the glass.
His shots are so incredible.
Improved spacing would have opened passing lanes and made this more efficient, but cutting and moving off Wilt's playmaking could lead to good offense. As a passing hub, he could even use the threat of the pass to set up a shot, something I haven't seen in clips before 1964. So he had similar athleticism to that 50-point year, but strategically looked to pass more when he caught it down low. And some
His spacing is just ridiculous.
of that stylistic adjustment looks like it carried over to the 76ers when he was traded back there in 1965, setting up a sequel where Wilt passed more and shot it even less.
But again, I think a lot of it goes back to his teammates.
In 1966,
He becomes
the
Jokic.
76ers finished with the best record in the NBA, ending a streak the Celtics held for
What a
9
horrible
consecutive
shot, Will.
years. But Boston still knocked off Philly in 5 games en route to another championship. Wilt averaged a career best 5.2 assists to go with 34 points per game that year. But again, his team's offense was only slightly above league average, even though he was no longer flanked by defense-first players. Philly featured 10-time All-Star Hal Greer, 7-time All-Star Chet Walker, and a rookie named Billy Cunningham, who would finish third in MVP in 1969. In the
They had a
1967
good team that
season,
year.
Alex Hannum came east to coach Wilt again, bringing with him that movement offense built around Chamberlain in the post. Only this time he was surrounded by better shooters. Even their power forward, Luke Jackson, could step outside and make jumpers. And Greer was one of the best 3 or 4 mid-range shooters in the entire league. These players could also create their own offense, so they didn't have to play through Wilt as much.
That's special. You know what? You want to deny the entry, that's fine. I'm gonna let you have it.
Walker and Cunningham could score off the bounce, and Greer in particular could start cooking teams all by himself with the ball. This is a little high pick and roll with Wilt, where he crosses nicely away from the screen for a long 2.
Overbuild,
and
that's special.
Hal could create offense for his teammates too, so it was natural for Chamberlain to take a smaller role with stronger offensive teammates. Here's how Coach Hannum described it.
It was not necessary for him to score in order to win. It wasn't necessary for him to carry the whole load offensively. He had the type of talent to play with, and this gave me all kinds of weapons.
I also think Philly had slightly better spacing than the 64 team in San Francisco.
Which naturally, again, if you have better shooters, more talent is going to happen.
Wilt often caught it a few steps farther out, and that opens the lane for plays like this, a beautiful pass on a backdoor cut to Walker for a layup. This also helped Wilt with his own passing. They run the split action, but this time he actually has a skip pass to the other side to a shooter. Compare that to 64, where Wilt is parked in a driving lane, and everything's a touch more cramped, so passing is harder. Here's a mid-post catch in Philadelphia into split action. He might have Cunningham, but instead Jones wheels around to get it, and then Wilt can go hit the glass and clean up.
No way he shot that.
Because of this
improved
offensive system, Chamberlain missed more passes from what I saw, but he also made more quality passes than in any prior season. So I think he was in a better passing environment, but he also improved a little as a distributor. Here's a beautiful...
But again, it's different than anything he'd done before, so it's hard.
Interior pass for a layup. And this is a rare instance of him manipulating defenders with the shot fake to free up a teammate. He also just looked to score less this year. He doesn't even think about attacking here, and maybe playing slightly higher in the post deterred him a little. On this play, he's only a few feet farther out, but a finger roll from 6 feet is way more comfortable than this 10-foot attempt. Part of this change was obviously trusting his teammates to orchestrate. He's quick to reset to Greer here and let him go to work.
Dude, how Greer was good.
And I think the
I don't like I like just from what I'm seeing in the confidence, man.
Other part was him just slowing down a little physically. Wilt gained a ton of weight over the years, and that took away some of his agility and explosiveness. Although he still had most of his mobility compared to 1964, and that added strength continued to make him valuable away from the ball, nearly dunking Russell into the hoop here. A good chunk of his offense in the games I've seen from this period came off ball because he was still a huge target and great finisher around the rim. It also helped having better passers like Greer to find him down there, and
look at the hands. That's special at 7'1".
Additional muscle made him a beast on the offensive boards.
He's
We
just
can
pushing
only
Bill Russell
estimate
around.
offensive rebounding numbers for those years, and 1967 looks like Wilt's best season on the glass, blending his length, power, and activity since he was no longer the focal point of the offense. And these clips remind me a little of trying to keep Shaq off the glass in his heyday. The result was a
Look at Nate Thurman. He can't handle Big
regular
Wilt either.
season. 14 percentage points ahead of league average in true shooting, and that helped Philly produce the best offense in the first 20 years of the league. Coach Hannum is a big part of that story too, because his style unlocked all of Philadelphia's talent, and that movement-heavy proto-triangle system he ran had a history of improving offenses for multiple franchises. I'm also a big believer that playoff numbers are more important.
They are. even in today's game.
And Wilt's best postseason scoring numbers weren't actually in his 1962 mega season, but they came in the 1964 playoffs.
He shot well.
He only played 12 games those years, and using raw points per game places it near the best postseason runs of that era. We can also see the radical shift in his game over the years by looking at that ratio of shots to assists. 1962 was extreme scoring. 1964 was more of a balance between scoring and creating that resembles many other modern superstar seasons. And 1967 is actually closer in style to a pass-heavy point guard.
That's crazy. Look at those three. Oscar, Magic, and Nash. That's where Wilt was at.
Reminder, Wilt was a monster on defense, so his play on that end will influence his overall peak. But here we're primarily interested in his offense and which of these scoring styles produced the best result. If I had to pick, 1962 is probably a little too devoid of playmaking, but 1967 also lacks the same scoring pressure that he generated in 1964 when he balanced those two skills more. Either way, I think the key lesson here
is the players around you.
Is at the heart of successful offense, and something Alex Hannum knew all along. There needs to be a balance between individual scoring and playmaking, because 5 players are harder to stop than 1.
Just the facts.
And since Wilt's mega
you have to have the players around you to do it.
Couldn't single-handedly create a strong offense, any good team would need him to pass more and score less.
Shout out to Thinking Basketball. Great video breaking down Wilt's offensive career. Because again, it started crazy in scoring and then ended crazy in passing. I don't know. For me, though, I think his ability to adapt is impressive, especially, given it being a long time ago. Like, it's not as easy as it is now to adapt and change. But again, I think a lot goes back to the teammates of Wilt Chamberlain. That's going to wrap it up, guys. Drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, and as always, man, I love you guys. Have a blessed day.